Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Zoom Test Kitchen, where we meet every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. My name's Jeff Widgren, and I'm your host, but simply a moderator. We're all here to join in and contribute, either to teaching or learning, whichever the topic may be for you. But always good to be here with you, and always lots to learn as well. So want to do a sound check real quick. Everybody hear me clearly? All right. I see lips moving with Ray, but no sound, and I think he did it on purpose. Anyways, hello, golly, let's go through the list. Got David, Ray, Hasmuk, Frank, Robert, Lois, Jason, Mike, Daniel, and I got one more, not my glasses on, Dalta, or Dala, actually. Let me see if that's a T. I think there's a T in there. There, Data, yeah. Very good, or Deida. So correct me if I'm wrong. I apologize for messing it up if I did. But anyways, hope everybody's had a good week. Got a good weekend
Robert says they can't turn their mics on.
Oh, that's true. That is true. Apologize for that. Let's fix that. There we go. Now you can unmute. I turned that off because I went ahead and started the meeting and the music and so forth, but then I left and ran to the convenience store real quickly, but forgot to come in and turn that back on. So the recording's going, and we cover some area. I think David is, Florida? We got David and Ray both, actually, are Florida, right? And Robert's Poland. Frank, remind me, where are you from?
I'm currently in Ottawa, Canada.
Ah, very good. And Lois is out in beautiful, sunny California. Jason, I'm not sure that I actually have looked to see what area of the country you're from.
He's also in Florida. He just warned me the storms are coming.
Uh-oh. And Mike, how about yourself?
Toronto, Ontario. Not as far, but closest probably to Frank, but that's about it.
Yeah, very good. Hasmuk.
Cape Town, South Africa.
Cape Town, South Africa. What time is it in South Africa right now?
21:05.
All right. A little later. And is that Friday or is that Saturday? I'm assuming it might be Saturday.
No, it's still Friday.
It's still Friday? All right. Robert, you're going late too, right?
Yeah, I'm in the same time zone, so we're 21:05, and Friday's still Friday.
Yeah, very good. I was chatting online with Mickey, and he's got several hours on us. I think he's 13 hours ahead of me in Central Time U.S., so we're gonna connect Saturday evening my time. But anyways, I see that Eric is logging in, still says he's connecting to audio, and Danielle and Deida are here as well. But in my invitation, I sent out, I always try to have some topics in my pocket, but only after we kind of open the floor to topics that folks may have arrived with as well. So I do want to let you all know that we've lined up some time, I believe. Let me pull up my calendar so I don't misspeak. Let's see. We've got Sam from Zoom scheduled in the Zoom Test Kitchen on the 9th of September. And then we have Sam may join again, but Andy made the appointment for the 30th of September after they return from, he's got more than just IBC while he's in Europe, but after they return from their Europe trip, they want to come back and get us all caught up on their announcements that they're pocketing until IBC. And so we'll review those and see what exciting features they've got. I'm not privy to any. All I can do is read into some of the messages that Andy has dropped out there, protecting the actual announcements and so forth. But some improvements to, continuing improvements with Zoom ISO and Zoom OSC, but don't know for sure, so we'll see. But it's getting to be a very rich environment. I loaded up a Zoom OSC template today as well. Let's see if I actually can bring that up and share it. I meant to add my monitors here so I can do it not having to share it. Let's see here. Get my desktops. All right, that's my Zoom desktop. And then there's the companion. How many of you are using Zoom OSC and or Zoom ISO these days? And Robert, what's your workflow? What are you leveraging in those features?
Well, two things. On general meetings with OSC, and we're just doing spotlighting with a Stream Deck. And then with ISO, we feed everything into vMix for what all we do in vMix.
Yeah.
And we also feed the multiple language channels into vMix, and then we can stream in multiple languages as well.
Very good. Yeah, it's a great place to start. It really is, and it's becoming so much more as well. To as we can begin to do more with it. So let me bring up my screen here. If does somebody want to kind of manage some spotlighting today? Like when I bring up or somebody brings up a virtual screen, that if you want to volunteer for that, feel free to volunteer on that. But even just taking a look at these pages on this initial template, group management, group 1 through several, creating groups, selecting attendees and so forth, and creating groups, and then by group, being able to pin, spotlight, make them a panelist, make them an attendee, which is promote, demote, allow to record, disallow to record, all at button presses, versus really kind of bringing these mouse-driven features only inside of Zoom out onto some type of a control surface. And leaving the meeting, that's abrupt, by the way. If you click that, you're gone. And so if I were to push that button, I'd be out of this meeting in a heartbeat. But much unlike when you're in, and you're the host on the interface, you click, it gives you a, pop-up warning, and you confirm it. Clear the spotlights, lower all the hands, enable and disable the waiting room, and send a chat to everyone as well. And then if we go to a second one, now I'm not, at the moment, I'm not tied into, with Companion tied into this meeting. Otherwise, you would see names populated on these buttons based on who's here and so forth. But you can you can select multiple individuals. If I were to shift click, and they had folks that it would actually select multiple individuals, and then you can set them to definable groups. And then once they're in groups, that's where these come into play. You do this to that group if you wish. And then you can do that by gallery position as well. And so if you have a custom gallery. So we've got one more. And this isn't like the limits of anything by any stretch, but this came from Andy, so this template said join, I think it might have been after hours. And so he had kind of a one button push for join after hours. And so this is how he gets in and out of meetings so quick, right? He keeps Zoom OSC client up all the time and just pushes the button to join another meeting. I changed it to, start Zoom Test Kitchen. And you can page your way through multiple paged gallery views here, start the local record, pause the local record, and so forth. Disable and enable the waiting room, video on and off, mute. And this is my own, and this would control myself. But it's a great learning ground. So if you go, who is it muting? You click on it and you look over here. If I blow this up a little bit, you can see that the keyword being me, and it simply says mute, where this one says me and unmute, and then the same thing with the video and so forth. So pretty simple actions, just global actions is what it's under, and these are all built into the presets that are over here, and they're large. There's just a bunch of presets that you literally just kind of click and drag these guys over and drop them on the buttons that you wish, and you don't have to know a lot of coding or anything like that. So kind of cool stuff. It's think about, it's just been several months since Andy and his team have been over at Zoom, and the product, which was great when it was acquired by Zoom, has quickly become so much more with some internal influence and development by Andy and team. So doing a great job making it quite powerful. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there's one more workflow that we have which may interest other people, is when we have a meeting and have all of the main speakers in the meeting, and then feed that into a webinar for the attendees to see what's going on, and with feeding this, of course, through vMix and mixing it up and overlaying it and putting lower thirds, etc. What we do is we have a button defined that will allow the sound from the webinar to come through to the people in the meeting, so that they can see what's going on in the webinar, what the attendees can see, and what they can hear. And unfortunately, we have not found a way of automizing that, so we manually have to switch it off when we switch modes, so that we don't get a feedback loop. The audio routing can always be the biggest challenge for sure. But so it sounds like you have your own manually structured, if you will, green room that you're giving them a return feed for, kind of where the stage is and how long it's they've got till it's their turn and so forth for going on. Have you spent any time with the Zoom backstage in webinar yet? A little bit, but we've played with it more than done any live events. So no is the answer. I guess it's a question of priorities, because we're really focused on the transcripts at the moment in the transcription mode, because we recently upgraded our business account to a Pro 1. So we have the transcripts and everything. And we're trying to figure out how to use that in a business environment. So that's our focus at the moment.
Very good. Yeah, it's your business, and therefore it's your focus. Totally get it. And so, yeah, the multi-language, I mean, you've provided the human multi-language and still do. That's your world. And now that it can be, assisted with captioning, that will help with that same kind of result. Don't know what the accuracy differences, will be between a human translator. I'm not close enough to know. Maybe you can enlighten us, and the captioning, but I've been pretty impressed with the captioning, but I haven't had a lot of evaluation on the translation, which was part of my drive. I've asked, for those of you that were around about a year ago, we had Joey, the events product manager, one of the product managers at Zoom, in the Zoom test kitchen, really when it launched, and to get us all introduced to it. And when we had that event in the Zoom test kitchen, Robert and his company and good folks that worked there provided 6 different languages, 6 different languages worldwide. And it was fascinating, the amount of work and effort and preparation and so forth. That kind of stressed me out at the end, that we talk about and remember, because he had so much on his plate, and the clock was ticking and so forth. But it all worked out, and the results were just fascinating. So the talent that they've got and patience they've had on waiting for some of those other features to come around and so forth has been really great. So point being, I've asked Robert if he was interested in doing that again this year, which would be potentially the 30th of September, when Andy and team are coming back in to do the announcements and all. And I'm not putting you on the spot, Robert. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. And, I think it sounded like the main thing was, if you have enough time to evaluate, the caption translation and so forth ahead of time, to be able to shine brightly in those deliverables with your translators as well, that you may be able to provide that again and show it off. It's really meant to be a showcase of the services and the captioning, translation, and so forth. So it'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, actually, on this coming Monday, we are doing a whole week of interpretation into 8 languages. It's a training session, and we're going to use the closed captions and record them, and then we'll be able to assess the quality of the translations of the live captions. And that's what I'm waiting for now, to be able to do that with you, Jeff. But
Nice.
Yeah, so I'll be back very shortly. It's ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck with that. And if there's anything we can help as far as kind of a group of folks to, tune in or do local records and deliver them to you as a result, whatever the case may be, feel free to, knock on our door, and we'll help out accordingly.
That's interesting you say that, because we'd actually set up virtual machines in the cloud to do all of the recordings. So that's something else we're testing at the moment.
Yeah.
Because when you got 8 languages and you're recording them, one with the original sound and one without the original sound, to have a clean translation, you actually need 16 machines for 8 languages plus the original floor language. So the numbers just really suddenly blow up, and it can get out of hand. But thank you for the offer. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Our pleasure. David Paskin, been waiting there patiently.
Hi there. I just wanted to, so I'm now a companion beast. I was terrified of companion. I was terrified of it. But now that I have the tiniest understanding of it, it's changed my world. But I'm actually using it with Zoom ISO instead of OSC, because OSC is built into ISO. And I just wanted to show that this may be kind of a glimmer of what's to come. I downloaded the latest build, and I don't know if you can see there, but at the very bottom of my Stream Deck emulator, or whatever you call it, Oh no, that's not it. Hold on. Oh, I can't do that. There is a output ISO and audio ISO. So I don't know what that means yet. But there's a button there for
it
audio
would have been my
ISO.
guess and statement a few minutes ago of what's coming, So yeah, you're right. I have a feeling it's coming. So that's a good tale. I might guess the YouTube viewer named Andy right now, who I don't know that he's really there, but he's often listening because like last week, I think you were asking breakout room questions with, using Zoom OSC and ISO. I got a message from him later, and he may have hit you as well, is that the breakout room features were added to 4.1 OSC, and that's not all integrated into ISO. ISO's packaged executable yet, so it'll be a little bit of a wait, but not too long. I think mid-September, right? So
that's the hope. Yeah.
Cross your fingers. So yeah, it's nice to have know that there's some ears that are listening either live or reviewing quickly. Andy might put playback on 2+X playback speed and just quickly review if there were some areas or questions that he might be able to answer and fill in, and he does a great job. I really respect him for that. So all right, well, thanks for sharing that. Lois and husband, how are you?
I'm Lois. That's Jim.
Hi, Jim.
In case you didn't know. So at our Quaker meeting, there is a Chromebook that the meeting bought and we're trying to use. And Jim has a question on how to get the Zoom audio settings panel up on a Chromebook. Because on my Mac, I can do that, and then I have sliders to adjust things. And on the Chromebook, we can't find the same thing. So
neither one of us have ever used a Chromebook other than this one at the meeting.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I mean, it's I would say it's most closely related somewhat to a mobile device, but some of their mobile device releases, Android and iOS, are probably richer because the Chromebooks lean more towards the browser implementation versus not. I just know on the mobile devices where we would have options to, desktop, super simple, you bring up your audio, you've got your sliders, gain control, volume, all that. Mobile devices, you have to, some of them anyways, and there I think there's even a difference between like iPads and iPhones because of form factor, is you have to get out of the, not leave, but visually get out of the meeting, go back to the client's base screen to go into some of the settings that affect you when you're visually in the meeting as well. And that's not a connection or disconnect that I mean. It's just visually leaving the app to its other initial screen. I don't know if that's the case on the Chromebook or not. Is there anybody here that is Chromebook familiar? Go ahead, Ray.
the Chromebook also uses Android apps. So while I haven't done a Zoom meeting, I've listened to a Zoom meeting with it, but I've not. I'll go and take a look at it and tell Lois after this what I've learned. But there are Android apps that run pretty well on Chrome. So if you can find it in the Android world, you'll find it in Chrome.
Are you all saying that you can't change the input and output volumes on a Chromebook in a Zoom meeting? Is that what I'm
I don't
hearing?
have it. I don't have it in front of me now, so I would be guessing. I'll take a look at it and talk to you about it, or send you a note later.
Yeah, it's just Lois. I put a link in chat, and that is to how to play with the actual video, or sorry, the audio of the mic and volume on a Chromebook.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mike.
Yeah. So
Appreciate
that'll at least get you halfway there. Now, to make sure that it works with Zoom will be the next part, of course.
All right. Hey, Frank.
I'm not a huge Chromebook user, but I do know that Zoom on a Chromebook, there were two ways to do it. There was a Chrome app, and then what's called a progressive web app. And Zoom is phasing out the Chrome app in favor of the progressive web app. So make sure you're using the progressive web app. And I put a link to that in the chat as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Frank.
That's going to be useful. Yeah, there was some brief message when I took the Chromebook from the meeting, brought it home, and it just flashed up a brief message, something about being discontinued soon. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
which may be a good reason, I mean, to Frank's point and the message you saw, which means they have an equivalent or better replacement on the Chromebook now. So probably be worth researching that and trying to go down that road instead. So yeah, a couple of links there and suggestions. Actually, there's three links there.
I'm not seeing that. Are you on?
No, so go to the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. All right. Anybody else topic-wise have anything to share or ask or wish to dig into?
Yeah, Jeff, this is Joe.
Yeah, Joe.
Hey, it's more of a word of warning. Is probably you guys know about this odd behavior of Zoom, but it bit me in the ass the other day. And that's if you're signed on. I was signed on to a webinar as not a presenter. What do they call it? Not a presenter. It's called
an attendee.
A
panelist.
A panelist. So I'm signed on as a panelist, and that's where I'm pushing my program into the webinar through that panelist connection. But then I went and logged in as an attendee, which I normally do in order to see what the audience is seeing. But I signed in with the same account, and it booted me out of the panelists, and it's just, oh my God, it just kicked my ass. Yeah. It's just one of those things to be able.
I think there is an option. Well, yeah, to let the same account connect multiple times, but if you don't set that option on to allow it, it'll do exactly what you experienced there.
I'll be looking for that option.
Yeah. If somebody wants to, dig it up, Mike or Jason, I see you maybe searching that out. If you find it, let me know and I'll let you share it out.
Yeah, the only thing that I could suggest would be to do similar to what Jeff is would just basically have another machine available and be able to log, but again, just have basically another free Zoom account and have that login as the attendee for yourself so that you're not kicked out. Right?
That's typically what I do. I have a different login for each machine. This was just an odd case where I had the same login on my attendee machine.
Yeah. Well, and the other workaround on that, I believe, is on the same machine using the same account. Let's assume that your hosted account, your hosted webinar, is being hosted from what we've always referred to as the vanilla Zoom client. Fire up the Zoom OSC client and connect to the account or the webinar with that. It won't, I don't believe, even to this day, it hasn't in the past, I don't believe it will, it won't disconnect you and roll you over the other one because it's separate. It's much like if you, and this might be another workaround for you as well, is if you connect with the same account, but do it with a mobile device. A mobile device commonly provides that exception of multi-account sign-on as well. So it's that you had two desktops. But the other thing, historically, it's not just historically. The other thing is when we host a webinar, is commonly we'll initially host that in a practice session, right? So that it's not live and so forth, is being able to have that pre-check, meaning being able to be an attendee in a webinar that's not yet allowing attendees to connect. And that can simply, that can easily be accomplished if you create an extra panelist link for that purpose, have that device log in as that panelist, and then simply demote them to be an attendee. And it being the panelist initially gets them in the practice session webinar, and then you'll still have the freedom to demote them to be an attendee even within the practice session. So it gives you all those checks and balances before you have to open the doors, if you will.
Perfect. That's all great information. I'm going to try all this stuff later today.
Cool. Good stuff. Anybody else have any tips or tricks or whatnot around that?
Yeah, I have one. It's more of a word of caution, really, and I learned this the hard way. In fact, working on your account, Jeff, because you have authentication switched on.
Yep.
Now, what authentication does for you is that it verifies that the account on Zoom that you have is correctly logged in. And we have this problem. We had this problem when we did the interpretation. Remember when you started sweating because we were getting so close to the timeline?
Yeah.
And that the interpreters had two devices, and they had the same Zoom account on each device, but were logging in with different emails and didn't realize that the authentication was just throwing them into one session of Zoom and really messing things up.
Gotcha.
And the same thing happens with webinar if you're allowing multiple logins. You may think you have multiple logins because you've got two different email addresses, but if you have the same Zoom account logged in on each of the laptops, you end up in the same rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that you have to be careful of that I've found, it just happened to me today when I was doing something. When you, I was toying around with the announcement, but I hadn't found out where it is of a new release that we read through last week, which was more control of Zoom cloud recordings from within your local client. I'm like, where the heck is that? And so I finally found it, and you have your meetings tab, and then you have recordings as well. And then you can go down the recordings, which is a list of all your past meetings. And if it was cloud recorded or local recorded, it gives you a link to click on and go there. So I found a cloud recording of a past Zoom test kitchen, clicked on it, and it gave me this 200 error that I can't remember exactly what it said, but like cloud recording hadn't been enabled, I believe is about what it said, error 200. I'm like, what the heck? And so it drove me a little nuts, but the problem was not necessarily this new feature. It was what my browser had already been logged in as, and that was a different account. And so I'm logged into the client with my credentials that host this meeting, which is well capable. Everything's enabled. It's got past recordings and so forth. But when I clicked on the link in that client, it hit the browser that was open and went to zoom.us and so forth. But it used the cached login there, not the one associated from the client. And so you have to be really careful there also on the same machines. I'm trying to remember what my trigger was, but quite some time ago, I told Zoom client to stop remembering me. And so it no longer knows the last account that I logged in as. I have to manually type in my login every single time I start my Zoom client, because the work I do from freelancing to my own customers and so forth, it might be their account, it might be my account. I have to be very explicit, and quite honestly, the browser still kind of kicks my butt. I haven't been able to find out, and if somebody knows, make my day, is how can I tell, my Chrome browser to stop remembering my Zoom credentials that I was logged in with. And, but, I don't really care if it remembers everything else it remembers, but that particular domain, I want it to ignore, so that those issues, because like Zoom Events, deals with the same thing. Zoom itself, I think it's enforced now. Zoom Events was the one who introduced it off of months and months and months of wishes. It's like, how do we keep people from sharing a Zoom invitation with others, right? And so Zoom Events answered that and said, whatever Zoom account you were logged in as when you registered and we produced a ticket to the event is going to have to be the account that you're logged in as when you show up to attend the event. That's enforceable. And Events did that. I know I read that Zoom was going to inherit that behavior as well. I don't know if it was meetings or if it was webinar or both, but that enforceability, and then all those cached layers, of potential other accounts that were cached, can become a little bit of a challenge.
Jeff, I just wanted to give some stuff on that about with Chrome. I've noticed that basically what you'd have to make sure to do, of course, is to go up to the top right once you're logged in through the web browser into the account, is to make sure that you do actually do a sign out or a log out at the top, and then it should give you back to the page. And then if you don't want to stay in that account all the time, make sure that the boxes stay logged in is unchecked. And you can do that in the client as well as you can do that in the browser, if I'm not mistaken. But that's at login.
Yeah. So
what that'll do is it won't save any cookies or anything funky that Zoom is leaving behind in the Chrome browser or any browser. That would actually then, but again, you do have to manually make sure to log out of that account once you're done with that account.
Yeah, and that's what I have to do with my client. It was actually a post in the Zoom community. I was going to bring in my hat. I got my Zoom community ball cap, or community champion, whatever I think they call it, the Zoom community champion. And we all had a meeting the other day with a lot of the Zoom folks, and Ray Harwood, who some of you know from Office Hours, and he's a community champion as well. But anyways, it was a post on the community quite some time back that I responded to, and it was, when I close Zoom, when you leave the meeting and then you close the app, it doesn't close the app. It ends up in the tray in Windows, and it does the same behavior in Zoom or Mac as well, but it doesn't close the application. How can I get it to close? And the answer is you have to sign out first. So even when you're signing in, you say, don't remember me, but that doesn't cure closing the app. Even when you say, don't remember me, it'll still just go to the tray signed in. You have to explicitly sign out. And then when you close the app, it'll close. It'll actually close. So it's because you're logged in, it assumes that you want it to still run in the background, not with an open meeting, but chat, notifications, things like that.
Yeah,
and
it's for their phone functionality as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's simple enough solution, and it really mimics the client behavior that I'm really used to. I just haven't changed my habits, because I'm doing it right now, that's why I'm not looking at the cameras, is if when I leave this, instead of just closing the tab, is simply sign out and then close the tab. Then if I had a meeting link that wanted to take me there, it would make no assumptions of who I am and what account. So I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, it comes all back to the good habit of making sure that when you're done with something, log out. Log in
clean
only
it
when
up.
you need it, and log out when you don't need it.
Yeah.
And it also comes down to and I can also vouch, since you brought up Windows and Mac, I can also vouch this also happens in Linux as well.
So, Jeff, when you talk about closing, there's a difference on the Mac between closing and quitting. If you can close all the tabs and not see it, and it'll still be running. But if you actually go up there and say, quit this program, that shuts it off totally until you reopen the program, which means you're not going to have anything in the background.
You can hold Command Q or go to the quit menu. Absolutely.
It does remember what you're logged in as, so you would have to change that. But there is a difference between quitting and closing on a Mac.
Yeah, and that was a big difference between the two OSs for years. Was when you clicked the X on a Windows app, it closed, and when you clicked an X on a Mac app, it did that. It kept running in the tray. Had for the longest time a little white dot in the dock, right, showing you that it's still kind of there and open and ready for use. Windows never did that, but certain app developers began inheriting that. Based on the services that they provide, if you will, and so when you close certain apps, they don't actually really close, and most of them do.
On top of that, too, Jeff, some of the programmers as well will have it in their preferences where you have to make sure that you go in and uncheck, when I close, to make sure. When I do hit X,
that's true.
Make sure to
it says like on close, minimize to system tray, right? And then you're really kind of telling it, put it in the tray, just get it out of my way is all. And the difference is like an open app is a bigger button on the taskbar in Windows than like if you have a shortcut to it, right? But when you tell it to go to the tray, it doesn't leave the big button. It's kind of it's almost like real estate management and application readiness for speed, if you will, to resume it when you need it. So just interesting behaviors. I mean, I've got Macs next to me. I've got an iPad and a Mac. I've got two old MacBook Pros sitting over there. One of them actually is dual boot with Linux, and I'm not a big Linux guy, but I wanted to, be able to have a platform with it to test things out on. But needless to say, a lot of different behaviors from operating systems to application behaviors and so forth to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, I can vouch that Linux is definitely stable when it comes to Zoom.
Cool. Very good. Good to know. Yeah, Lois.
Okay, so backing up a little bit, and we were talking about you're logged in with your client on one computer, you go to another computer, you log in accidentally with the same the same account. So can you put in a request to Zoom to put in a safety thing? In other words, something flashes up in the screen and it doesn't say, do you want to claim host or stay co-host? It says, you're going to kick the other instance out. Do you want to kick it out or you want to not? So you have a choice before you click the button and boom, you're kicked out, that you have a little warning. So
I'm trying to, I think I personally need a little more clarity on the boot, because if I were to join another meeting right now under the same account that I'm using to host this meeting, it won't take me out of this meeting. It will sign me out of being logged into the client, but it will not remove me from this meeting. And so maybe we can discuss and identify some clarification between when it actually boots you out of one and because you signed into another versus my experience has been I know you get signed out but not necessarily booted out.
If you're in the same meeting, I'm in here once and now the same account on another computer is me trying to get in a second time. The first one's gone, right? You guys have had that experience, haven't you?
I know that from my previous stuff that I've done, I know that I can't have a client on two different machines with the same account at the same time running. Zoom doesn't like that either.
Well,
so
okay, yeah.
I wouldn't be able to run into that situation myself.
On the same machine? Is that what you said?
No, two different machines.
Trying
two
to log
different
in
machines, same account. I can't log into that second account on a different machine. I have to be in a physically totally different account.
Is that on the same platform though? I think you can log in from the same account on mobile and
well,
you can definitely, you should be able to do it on mobile. And that's why I don't want to test this on my iPad that's next to me here, but I have a MacBook Pro under it that I'm willing to test
Frank,
this
to answer
on.
that question, it was Windows for both.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like if you're in a Windows client application and a progressive web app, you probably could do it. If you do it from Windows and an iPad, you can probably do it, but you can't do it from a Windows application and a Windows application at the same time.
Okay. I'm
I think
try that later.
I think that's the limitation.
Yeah, I'm going to try that later because I'm going to see if Windows and Linux will be different.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a shot. I don't have
having a computer and a computer. I can certainly log in with my iPhone while I'm already in a meeting. That doesn't hurt at all.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's take that as those who can. My second Windows computer is the one streaming this meeting out right now, so I can't test it there. And I do log in as a different account on that one when I stream this. So
I see Joe is testing it out for us right now.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see if we can get some results during the meeting, and if not, we'll come back and circle back on the topic as well. I've got an echo coming in. It might be coming from you, Joe. Thanks. Lawrence, seemed like I approved you lately to join the group. Is that an accurate recollection?
It is. It is.
Thanks for joining us. How are you? And where are you joining us from?
From the UK. I'm in the UK. And I suppose I've made an impression on other forums that you're a part of, office hours and after hours. And Dave, I can see on the call, who's been, awesome at helping me achieve some goals. And I thought I'll just dial in and give a shout. I raised my hand initially for the issue you were having, but others had kind of suggested, the one thing I know that we generally don't like doing is when we delete our browser or browsing cache, we leave the passwords alone. And that's because we don't want to go in and type stuff all over again. But that could be something, especially for your browser issue, that you should consider. If you empty the cache and include passwords and all that.
Because it's a good point, because we can go in there and see all the credentials that individually, and I can say, hey, get rid of the Zoom one or the Zoom one entries that you have, and stop remembering that as well. And I'd have to do that. I use one pass or one password that's really popular. LastPass, and I use one called TrueKey, but I'd want to do it in TrueKey for my desktop stuff as well. So, that's a good suggestion as well. I just in the business I'm in, I need all my convenience tools to ignore Zoom in particular, for sure.
Yeah. I know the feeling totally. I don't know whether it's the right forum to do this, but I had a struggle. But David Paskin, who's on the call, he hasn't. I don't think he's linked the face with the pings I've sent him, but that's the face, Dave. Okay, that's the face.
It was an eCam thread, if I remember right, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I really believe I've nailed it. And interestingly, by nailing it, I mean I've succeeded in sorting out to a large extent my audio video sync issue.
Awesome.
And Dave, like I mentioned, and others have been fantastic. And interestingly, the answer, the bit that I had to go back to was a video that Dave hosted with Andy with eCam. And there was something specifically Andy said, and he gave it a name. It's 27 minutes into the video that he starts addressing the point. And I'm not kidding you. I've had that on loop a long time just to get, to the crux of the issue. And he did say there categorically that it's not wise to, and I think Dave echoed it also in one of his responses to me, that it's not wise to try and pull a Zoom, Zoom guest into your eCam show and send it back to Zoom. That's not something that he advises. But then he said, if you have to do it, then it has to be 2 meetings. And we have 2 Zoom meetings. And in fact, you or someone else just mentioned you can't have two meetings, or you can't be signed into the same meeting twice on the same machine. What I did find out with my solution today is I could use Zoom ISO to start a meeting, then start another meeting on another machine, but join virtually. So using a web session to join that meeting from the same machine. Don't ask me how I did it. All I know is that if you have Zoom ISO, it's not considered that you're using the Zoom client.
Correct.
The native Zoom client.
Zoom ISO, Zoom OSC, is synonymous in this example. It's much like this differentiation that we know about with like mobile devices. Yeah, so Zoom ISO takes that exception, as well as a browser. So I could join this meeting again on this computer I'm hosting this meeting with the same credentials. I'm just about confident if I do it using a browser and not a client. And I have to be really careful trying that because the browser knows that I have a client, right? And I mean, because the link comes up and you actually have to read really carefully and really kind of force it to go in through the browser and not jump over to the client, which is already in use hosting the meeting. But it's just knowing all those, exceptions, rules, tricks, whatever you want to call them, of how you can get by with it because we're not breaking any rules. We're trying to accomplish some things, and there's some built-in limitations, and then there's those limitations can be kind of worked around with enough kind of testing and trial and so forth. So good stuff.
On your browser, you don't have to be logged in at all.
Yeah, if the host set up the meeting to allow that, that's true. But see, like this meeting, you wouldn't be allowed to come in if you weren't logged in, because I enforce authentication, which means you have to be authenticated by Zoom with a Zoom account before you're allowed to come into the meeting. It's an option when you schedule a meeting, and you can turn it on or turn it off. Yeah, when we, I don't even know, Lois, when we got Zoom bombed last year, how long it's been, a year or so, but I made a lot of changes after that.
Oh, yeah.
It was a terribly uncomfortable experience, and few things in life scar me permanently, but and change my habits, but that one really did. And I'm glad, I mean, in a sense, looking back, I'm glad it wasn't just one person who came in and caused trouble. It was like 5, all at the same time. It was well planned and executed, because if it wouldn't have been that severe, that quick and traumatizing, if you will, I may not have made as many permanent changes. I mean, like, Ray's been my bouncer ever since in the waiting room, and the waiting room is not allowed to be turned off ever, and so forth. So the only strict rule that I didn't implement since then, because Ray's been on top of the waiting room, and we don't turn it off, is the one that says, if you remove an attendee, don't allow them to come back into the meeting. I do allow them to come back in the meeting, because accidents happen, and it's I can't undo a permanent removal for the day, but I can have Ray decide to let them in when they show back up, because it was an accidental bump, versus an intentional removal, which he can just let them, remain in the waiting room the whole time. So it gives us that little bit of flexibility, but not the inconvenience. So
when you say for the
if you
day,
have-
you mean for the show, right? If you stop the meeting and restart the meeting, they can get back in.
Yeah. When they get, if I were to implement it to not be able to come back in, I can't undo that without stopping the meeting. And because they can come and join next week in this case, because that's my schedule, they can come and join next week, and I don't have to do anything to allow them to come back. It's the same meeting ID, and I'm not even sure what the rules are around that, but there's some deeper session ID that's unique to, because it's the same meeting ID, but there's got to be a global unique identifier or something that Zoom knows about, that knows that it's not the same session ID versus meeting ID. Because
one of these guys was really clever. If you'll recall, he came in as you.
That's true. Yeah. Well, that was the big Robert translation Joey visit, right? Is we had somebody caused an issue, Ray bumped them out, and they came back, but they came back as Jeff Whitgren, and Ray pinged me real quick and said, "Hey, are you trying to get in, with another device?" And I said no, and so Jeff Whitgren just sat out there in the waiting room for a long time until they finally disappeared. So yeah, they can get creative, that's for sure. Something we haven't done in a long time is, I always think about, when something goes awry. I mean, there's so many things in the security discussion, from planning the meeting to advertising the meeting, to how you host the meeting, how you manage the meeting. All those segments really have some very meaningful contributors. Like I'll say it, but I don't practice it, and that is, don't publicly advertise your meeting ID. Well, I do, and I have for a long time, actually. I wanted it to be the same meeting ID every week for convenience for anybody who wanted to attend, and so I wanted that. I wanted in the invitations, I didn't do a Facebook invitation this week because I'm really converting to the MailChimp email. I feel like there's a lot more responsiveness as far as people seeing it and so forth, and giving them the option to simply, unsubscribe if they want to. I've only had maybe 3 to 5 out of 600 emails I send out. When I send out that invitation, 3 to 5 that have unsubscribed, and about a 40% open rate. So, I think the effectiveness, and it's measurable, and I can see it and change it and correct it and so forth. But needless to say, I put the link in there, in this case to the registration page, but I also published the meeting ID and the password for those that have been previously registered, and can I've set it up so you can require registration, but you can attend any session forward, and so it shouldn't be forcing you to register more than once. And it's been set like that for a long time, but I have a feeling there might have been something that I wasn't aware of, other than the experience of people did register. They were still getting taken to the registration page, and it's like, but you were here last week or 2 weeks ago, and so shouldn't have done that. But it seems to be better now. I don't know if that's your experience or not, but if you've been in the Zoom Test Kitchen before and you've registered, you should no longer have to register. It should either pre-populate, or just if you go to the meeting ID and password, it should just let you in. Is that your guys' experience at this point?
I think, Jeff, it has something to do with the fact that you have authentication switched on, because I have 2 separate accounts. And with one account, it forces me to register each and every time I come in, because
Really?
I'm not logged into the Zoom account.
Oh. Interesting. All right. Well, very good. On the security stuff, that not to publicly advertise, but I mean, and you have to weigh all the there are suggestions, right? And so you have to weigh that. I go, well, I don't want to not, and I wanted to make it. It was really important to make it convenient, and so then when they arrive, what's their experience? And that is a waiting room that's always on. And the waiting room over time has gotten better, right? I mean, I turned the video off, the waiting room video off, because it's outdated, as Lois reminded me. I think it might have been the Andy video or something. But I just, when I get that updated, I'll roll a video in there again. But right now it's just a simple greeting with a logo. But it's always on. And then, like even when I started the meeting with the music and the slides today, I don't know, 35, 40 minutes early, and had to leave, I just joined with my phone with the same account, and it said, do you want to be a host or a co-host? I said, just make me a co-host. And so it was running in my car while I ran my errand, and then Ray showed up. And so I was driving down the street, and I at least admitted him. Now, at the end of the day, I tried to make you co-host, but I was a co-host, so I couldn't. And I didn't feel it was terribly necessary to swap roles, with my co-host to host and make my phone co-host or host. So I didn't mess with it, but I could continue to manage it while I was still, on the run, and knowing that I was coming back and so forth in time. So there's the waiting room, and then, just kind of a known set of rules. I mean, Ray, maybe you can share with us, what is it that you look for? Other improvements, video, logo, messaging, custom messaging in the waiting room. The other thing is we can message the waiting room now. We can do direct messaging to the waiting room, or we can do global messaging to the waiting room. And we didn't used to be able to do that at all. And that's been helpful, because I don't remember what meeting, but it wasn't all that long ago, is you were messaging somebody in the waiting room to put a name on themselves. They were like, phone this, or they were something very generic, and he wasn't going to let them in if they didn't make a change. And I don't think they ever did. They might have. Somebody wrote me. It was like, after the meeting, I saw a message in one of my, I don't know if it came from Facebook, I think, that actually legitimized. She was saying, my husband is waiting, blah, blah, blah. And I just knew that was the person you had to have been messaging, but they weren't responding to the, your suggestion and requirement of get a real name in there, and we'll let you in. But if they would have changed it, they would have been let in, I know. And so
was the case that they were doing audio on phone, because you can't rename yourself on a phone if you're doing just the audio part?
It wasn't as I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, it wasn't showing as a mobile device
No, it
in
wasn't.
there. Yeah, but
It was the phone number, though, right?
no, it
No, it was
wasn't
a
phone.
person. Yeah, I mean, it was not a recognizable anything.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It wasn't a phone number, as in when an actual phone hits the.
Didn't
meeting.
we have a chat go that was meant to go to a meeting room, go to the YouTube? I'm trying to recall that, whether that had anything to do with signing somebody on. I can't recall that.
Yeah, I don't
The first
recall.
thing you look for is if they don't come on with live video, and they do check in with, you show that they're connecting their audio and they're trying to connect the audio. As long as they're that step, then I watch them that far. If it's not somebody that I know, then at least they have a logo or something, human instead of a black screen. And those are the key things that I look for. But if it's somebody that I don't know, I stop letting other people in for the time being while I watch the first 30 seconds of that person. And if I have any doubts, I send them a text and say, let us see you, or, give us some kind of feedback. Because if they won't give you any feedback, then they're back in the waiting room.
When you're in the waiting room, can you change your own name? I think they'd have to leave, change their name, and come back, wouldn't they?
No, I think they can now. I mean, we can change names of somebody in the waiting room now, and I think they can as well while they're there.
I'm going to leave, come back, give me the waiting room for like 20 seconds so I can test it out, okay?
Okay.
Don't you say no way. I suck.
Very good. Yeah, and it's just establishing those. And I had asked Ray early on when we said, hey, waiting room is on, and always is. I said, if there's ever a question, follow them. Follow them in. And it sounds like such a physical rule, but it kind of is, in the sense is and I mean, it is put your Zoom client in gallery view. They're going to end up in the bottom right tile, and follow them in and see what their name is. If their name goes away and gets replaced with a logo, profile graphic, is that appropriate? And if they do in fact turn their video on, then make sure that's appropriate and legit as well. And you're always sitting there just kind of hovering with the mouse to have, possibly right click and remove, but that it's nice because you can right click and you can send them back to the waiting room. You don't have to boot them. You can just send them back to the waiting room and message them and ask them, the changes that you desire for them to be able to, come back in or whatnot. So it, we don't want to, come across as a community of fuddy-duddies. We don't want to come across as a closed community, for sure. We want it to, be a wide open community of anybody who wants to, share interests in learning, the depths of Zoom and webinar and so forth. And so that's not it. So, only a piece of it is, it's just an easy entry if Ray recognizes your name, but it's certainly not the golden rule that we have to know you. That would be a community that would never grow. But anyways, there's that. And then it's meeting management. It kind of makes me nervous at times because I manage, I've referenced this before, but I manage this Zoom meeting for this really popular UK author. And we can have, lately it's been, 200-300 people in the meeting. But when I first started doing it, she has this certain sessions that are super popular. And there were 900 plus people in a single meeting, not a webinar. And it was like the highest percentage of camera on because I guess of her status, I mean, she's no rock star to me. She's a client and I don't know her from her teachings or anything like that, but those who follow her and that interest and so forth, I think that has to do with a whole lot of cameras that are on so they can be seen, and then a lot of people raise their hands so they can get double spotlighted and ask her questions and so forth as well. But it makes me nervous because I can only see 49 people at a time. It's kind of like, is there anything inappropriate going on these other pages? Because I don't have additional moderators in that meeting. It's just me and her. And
That's what focus mode helps you do, though.
Yeah, it does. But she doesn't want focus mode. She wants this wide open, environment. She wants people to see people and so forth as well. And I totally agree, because I told her about focus mode, and she's like, no, doesn't want it. It's like, So
Yeah, that's risky.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Lois.
Two things. One is, no, I could not change my name in the waiting room at all.
Good.
And the second is regarding what you're talking about right now. We had a large meeting, and what I found was that as I was talking to people, it's a daily meeting, so you're getting to know people. And as I was talking to people, I realized that everyone who came in has their own picture in the upper left-hand corner, and then they see whoever got in there first. And so unless they move people around, which I do all the time, but unless they're doing that, everybody's seeing the first 25 or 49 people. They're not seeing the folks who the other several hundred unless they go looking. And
Yeah. Oh, you're right. I mean, they have to be as curious about page 2 and beyond, like that I am as well. But
what we did is we deputized some people to be co-hosts that simply their job was to go and look at all the pages and come back and look at all the pages, and that's all they did for the whole thing.
Yeah. There's just, depending on the size of the meeting, right? New roles and responsibilities and so forth, can arrive and show up. All too often, it's inspired by a bad experience, that you had a bad experience, therefore we need to, get more help or do more things or whatnot. And, with this client in particular, that's probably, what it would take is, unfortunately, kind of a bad experience that would be embarrassing and at that, but, it's limited to that audience. It's not streamed. It's not publicly released. We share the cloud-based recordings, but we don't allow download on them, and so forth. So,
does she require recognizing somebody before opening their mic?
No. They have to have their video on before I'll let them in. I used to, based off of her desires, I didn't clamp down the microphone muting. And now I never even told her. I just said, I'm done. I'm done managing open mics. And so I just, allowed to unmute is always turned off. And so when they have to raise their hand, so like Jason right now, he's in the top left because his hand is raised. That's the next person. There may be 5, 6, 7, 8 people lined up, but that's the next person on the platform. If their camera is on, I do a quick ask to unmute. I announce their name on the microphone, and I add the spotlight, and away they go. And then I do the next one on the next one, and that's it. And it just the meaning is just nice and quiet. It's her talking and teaching, or it's them discussing. It's only ever her and a guest, not a dynamic guest out of the audience, but no more than 2. And so it's pretty manageable. And the other thing is there's a time where she says, hey, get up and stretch and let loose and so forth. And so I'll crank up which one is it? I Will Survive, or one of the Beatles songs, because they're out of the UK. No, not the audience is from all over the world, but she's out of the UK, and so there's a lot of Beatle bass to it, and and that, I mean, admittedly, it's my favorite part of anybody's meeting, when you have a large crowd that, you know, stands up in front of their camera and dances and has some fun and lets loose, and then comes back to, you know, discussions and so forth a couple minutes later. I think it's a good time. It's often when I'll do like a full kind of gallery screenshot or few, because those are good moments. But needless to say, how do you cure a bad issue? You know, if you're on your own and so forth, is I think of that gas station red button, that emergency red button that I've never seen anybody push one, you know, but it kind of shuts everything down to either, you know, control a flame that started or prevent one from starting from the spilling gas at the gas station or whatnot. And
you said you use a microphone to make an announcement. Who are you making that announcement to?
To everybody in the Zoom meeting. Yeah, so she introduces me at the beginning, but I'm a faceless creature in that meeting. I'm just a voice, and so I'm just the voice that says, next up is so-and-so, and then do our thing. But yeah, it, you know, is under the security shield is the ability to suspend. Like, if you've got a problem and you don't know exactly where it is, but you know it, or whatever the case may be, like when we got hit by like 5 people at the same time. It was more than you could quickly manage out of the meeting, and it was before some of the other features were available, and so ironic how these things work, but I think we've all been there sometime. We had just tried it, like Ed Willick and I had just demonstrated this suspend participant activities like the week before, and so I knew exactly what to expect. I had never done it before until that 1 week before, and then all of a sudden I'm in a predicament that's all I could do was suspend the participant activities, which is the red panic button that shuts off all the video, shuts off all the microphones, including hosts and co-hosts, you know. So everybody's video, everybody's microphone, all the allow participant to features are all turned off. The waiting room is enabled, the lock meeting is enabled, the hide profile pictures are turned on, so no profile pictures as well. I mean, it just darkens the room, and people can leave, but no one's going to show up, and then it's what do you do from there? And that is, you know, I have to turn on my mic. I don't have to turn on my video, but if I want it on, I have to turn on my video. I have to turn on my mic. I have to, you know, make an announcement. I need to make sure the dirt's gone, if you will, right? Get rid of the garbage first, and then start bringing life back to the meeting. But it saves me from killing a meeting, right? You know, if you kill the meeting, you're potentially going to lose some audience, and you know, the optics are bad and so forth. But needless to say, it you know, it does a good job. I don't know that it's, you know, used a lot, but I'm glad it's there. I've used it once for real, and it was there. If anybody wants to see what it's like, I'm happy to do it. It's not a dangerous thing to select. It's just very effective.
And it takes less than a minute to get your meeting back. I had to use it in March, and we knew what to do, so it was quick.
Yeah. It you know, and it is, you know, I heard Guy on Office Hours, you know, one of it, I've heard him say it so many times, you know, practice, you know, and it was about a camera today, but it's just one of those things. It is practice, and you know, when you have to suspend participant activities, what's the very first thing you want to do? I'd say clean up the garbage. And then the very next thing you want to do is you want to unmute your own microphone so you can provide instructions to the rest of the audience while you bring everything back to life. Yeah, Robert?
I'd put reverse order on that.
Yeah, the tricky thing is, once again, with interpretation, because it actually mutes the interpreters. So even though you start speaking in your language, the non-English speakers or the non-floor language speakers don't have a clue what you're saying. So
Yeah.
so you need to go through it. Sorry?
All co-hosts can unmute themselves. So if your translators are co-hosts, they can unmute themselves.
You don't want to put translators, interpreters as co-hosts.
Yeah, that's a huge give of permissions that you're just asking for trouble and accidents and things like that. And so, with that, I would say maybe the next best thing would be when you set up your meeting, in that case with translators, knowing that that's the behavior. If all hell broke loose and you had to kind of hit that panic button, is make sure you set up your meeting that says request to allow host to unmute, and instruct your translators to answer yes to that, and then establish the protocol if this shutdown has to take place, that all hosts and co-hosts are aware that they have to unmute these individuals. Now, the quickest way to do that is yet another practice of them naming themselves with a special character or something up front, so they group themselves in the same area of the participants list, so I can quickly unmute several of them in an organized fashion. So,
or Jeff, in the new companion builds, they now have groups. So if you are using companion, you can put all of your translators in a group and then assign that group one button. That's unmute.
100%. Well, I mean, and you could take that further. I mean, I haven't done it, but my brain's spinning around all these new capabilities that continue to show up in Zoom OSC and Companion and all. Is my goal would be, and this is going to be one that I go after, is build a button and label it recover meeting, something like that. Recover meeting. How much, what's there that I can get done? All the unmutes of the interpreters, all the video ons, of whoever. Video on was a bad example because that's not doable. But all the things that it would take to quickly get everything back up. How much is possible with OSC and Companion these days, which could all be collapsed into a single button, versus what's still missing, and then that would be the list I'd send to Andy. It's like, so go ahead, Robert.
The other thing that we've asked Zoom to do is to actually classify the interpreters as a different group of users. And we do that. WebEx has that, for example. So if you mute all, you never mute the interpreters.
Nice.
It's conceptually, it's easy to understand, but I think it's just a question of priorities and resources.
Yeah, how many roles are there, known roles are there in Zoom? There's host and co-host, there's this, collective group, if you consider them that, those that have their hands raised, but coming into the meeting before they've done anything, do we know why they're there and for what purpose, right? That host and co-host is really kind of it. And I'd say it could be super useful, that's for sure, especially in the world of translation, for sure. Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I had a question regarding an earlier question that you had said earlier. When you remove participants, remove, not move them to the waiting room. Actually, remove them on a recurring meeting, so they get added to a blacklist, and you can go in to it's either the attendance report or registration report where they're, let me see, what note did I make here? Approved or denied, right? So their registration status has changed from approved to denied because you remove them. And if you want them to be able to come back into the recurring session, you have to go in and change their status in the registration list back to approved.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that only applies to webinar, not meeting, even with registration. Anybody confirm or deny, or we can go research. But I don't believe, I know that exists in webinar, and I can go remove somebody from the blacklist in webinar, but I cannot do that in meeting. And meeting seems to simply be, if I remove you from this, and this is a recur, and I had this happen just 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 3 to 6 weeks ago. Somebody got removed. Ray removed somebody. I think I was potentially unaware of it until later, and they got removed and they could not rejoin until I ran the meeting again. And that is, I ended the meeting and I started it, which in this case would be from one Friday to the next, and they could rejoin. I don't know who it was. So I don't know if it's one of you sitting here or not. Yeah,
this is Joe. It was me.
Oh yeah, it was you, Joe, because you pinged me later that night, and it was one of those accidental removals, and I wasn't aware of it, but Joe wrote me later that evening, and I never did a thing to cure it, but Joe was back, and it was because the meeting had ended and it restarted at another time. Same meeting ID, recurring. Man, I've had the same recurring. I've had to extend it as a recurring meeting with more meetings is all, but because you can only do like 52 meetings in the future ahead or something like that. But needless to say, it's always been the same. So, but webinar, I've had to undo a couple of people over my time, and I think that, why I sound just a touch iffy is that was a while back. So I don't know.
I'll have to test that. Changed. Yeah, because off the top of my head, I don't know if that is just a webinar thing. I know I've done it several times, but I can't remember if that was a webinar thing only or if that's universal. Then the other thing. Yeah,
Jason, it's a meeting thing as well. I've experienced this in meetings. If you throw someone out, he's blocked and he goes off into the blocked. If you have a process of registration
on.
Yeah.
Well,
but if you don't have registration on, then you're not.
There's also
Joe,
a setting. There's a setting.
Yes, and that was tied to the earlier thing that we were talking about. And I actually have that screen. Let me just make sure I've got the right screen up here. Yes, it is tied to the registration. So where we were talking about allow multiple devices, that's also part of the registration process on meetings. Yeah, I've got it.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Asma.
Yeah, no. I had the same thing when I was hosting after hours at the beginning of after hours. And we had this requirement, first name, last, or real first name, last name. And I removed somebody. And Alex said to me he had to go back to that report and change that report before that person could come back into the meeting. So they didn't have to re-register.
So I'd love to test this out. So Joe, you have 2 different registrations for the Zoom Test Kitchen, one at Chill Events and one from att.net. Are those both recognizable to you?
Yes, those are both me.
Can you if you're, I don't know the answer whether you're which one you're in with right now.
Joe at Chill Events.
Okay, so can you join from another device from the Mobius account?
Yeah,
and we'll boot you from with that account. When you get in, we'll let you in from the waiting room, and then we'll remove you from the meeting. Right. Then if you'll confirm, let us know that you got booted. Then you confirm that you tried to rejoin. I might not have that. I might not have that set. Let me go double check. I don't think I do. But
you have to change. You have to change it on that report at the back end.
And the report is only available after the session has ended.
Yeah. Correct. Well, the option, not just the report, but first the option of don't let them rejoin has to be turned on, and I'm not sure that I have that on. Let me double check.
I think remove does that already.
No. So under settings in the portal, there's an option under meeting basics is allow removed participants to rejoin. And so it says allow them to rejoin. And I do not have that option on, so they can't rejoin. And so with that, we can do this test because this is on. If I had to change that, it wouldn't work today because the meeting's running and I'd have
You're
to
already in
restart it.
session. Yep.
Yeah, but it is where it needs to be to accomplish the test. So now we got Joe coming in from this other account. We'll let him get audible with us.
Alrighty.
Did you boot him already, Ray?
I'm already.
Who
No.
booted him?
No,
No,
I'm
he
not
just
booted.
changed. He just changed to his picture.
I'm not booted. Yeah.
He's
Oh, you're not?
one is his the
Oh,
logo and one is the.
I see.
Yeah,
You
I'm
have
gonna
video on
rename-
one, and then you
I'm
have a
gonna-
second one. All
I'm
right,
gonna rename
so yeah, rename it just so we know we removed the correct one. So the one with the video on, we're looking at your live video, is the one you want us to boot.
Right.
Okay. So go ahead and do that, Ray.
Remove, right?
Yep. And then
See it, Joe, and report to Zoom. I'm going to take that off.
yeah, no need
Correct.
to report them.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
No need to call the police on the guy, you know.
Azimuth
It's
is
just a
laughing.
Not yet, anyway.
Of course you do that.
During
We
the
might
stand
learn
up and
something
stretch
about
section,
him
if
someday, but right now he's a good guy.
yeah, until Jeff tells us to stand up and stretch, and then we see
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
below the frame.
That's right. All right, so
Yeah. So,
so
it
let
says-
me
tells
bring
me
up.
tells me I'm unable to rejoin.
Okay, so you've come in as that account, you got booted, and you've tried to rejoin and confirm that you can't. So all those options are correct for this test. I'm going to show my desktop and
Yeah, we see that.
go to meetings, go to Zoom Test Kitchen, go to the registrations, and we'll go to view, and we'll go to CONST. I think that'll get us. No,
Joe.
I guess I could do Joe too, right? Yeah,
There you go.
it's Cast Daniel. So yeah, there's a few Joes, and the one we booted was
Mobius Loop.
No, the top one.
Says boot me now.
The one with Mobius Loop is the email, if that helps.
yeah, but I don't see it in this list. CAST. I saw it last time. There it is. So yeah, the Mobius loop, right? So I'll go on there, and yeah, I was thinking I thought what I heard you say is this registration would say declined at this point.
It will after this session has ended. It's
So he's-
not
Yeah,
He's-
but what's
he's-
keeping them out in the meantime? He tried to rejoin.
right. So he's there, but your report doesn't refresh until after the session's over. And it's when you pull that report
Gotcha.
that he's on the blacklist, denied,
Yeah.
and then you can change his denied status back to approved, or you can delete him entirely from the registration
And
list.
just let
in
him
which case
re-register,
he would
yeah.
re-register. Correct.
Yeah. So, but there's not a requirement to pull a report. The requirement is to end the meeting, you say. That will refresh the data. And then if I were to run the report, I would see that, or if I were to look up his name in this registration, I would see declined. Am I understanding what you're saying?
Yes, right. So Joe's on the blacklist. You don't know that yet until this session ends, where you can then pull a fresh report
Sure.
that will show you Joe's on the blacklist. And
Yeah.
then at that point, you can decide what you want to do about it. And until you
Alright.
do anything about it, then Joe's still on the blacklist for
Yeah.
the next recurring meeting.
So I wonder, I can't share all this screen, but if I find I've got a dashboard on this enterprise account as well. So I'm going to go into meetings right now, and there's the Zoom Test Kitchen meeting.
And while you're looking that one up, Jeff, when Ray pushes somebody into the meeting room, or any host or co-host pushes someone back into the meeting room, the messaging is one way only. The person in the meeting room cannot message back to the host or co-host.
They actually can. I just put it in the chat.
Oh, can they?
I just put it in the chat. There's a setting you have to enable, but if you do turn that on, it will force everyone to update their client.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. There's the waiting room features, the newest waiting room features, and the newest, I want to be able to manage breakout rooms while they're open. If you enable those features in particular, and I don't know that there's too many more if there's more, but those for sure, if they won't upgrade, they won't get in the meeting, period. They're deal killers. And so, cool features, but they definitely up the requirement for sure.
I had that issue this week. David, I'm just scrolling quickly through the chat. I didn't see where you dropped that in. Would you mind just popping that back in there so I can?
Yeah, it's the very last message.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
By the way.
Can I interrupt here?
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
I have one more thing of interest to report on this process. So once I was denied entry, the Zoom Test Kitchen has disappeared from my list of previous meetings I've been in. It's
nice.
Oh, really? Wow, they're thorough.
Nice. So if you don't publish the meeting number, then you've just erased the breadcrumbs for the offender to come back.
Yeah. So at least slow them down, all right?
Jeff, just going back to this waiting room and messaging. I remember when Lois hosted this meeting, Zoom Test Kitchen once, we practiced this. And I seem to remember that if she, as the host, sent me a message in the waiting room, a personal message, then I could respond to her. If she sent a general message to everyone, then no one could respond.
So direct message to Robert. Robert can respond back.
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah. We can test it out. Let's. I'm gonna send you guys. I'm gonna send. If anybody is on, I was going to say, if anybody's on that doesn't have their video on, go ahead and turn your video on. And everybody with their video on except myself, I'm going to send to the waiting room. And let me do three of you guys. So Jason, you're going to be first to the waiting room. There it is. Mike, you'll be next. And then Ray, I'm going to leave you here. Frank,
you can send me in.
Send you as well. All right, so we have 3 in the waiting room, Mike, Jason, and Frank. Now, we're not going to do anything yet, but look. So on my chat as the host, I can send, and one of my top choices, send to waiting room participants. So that would be an everybody. And then I can send to
click on
anybody in the list.
Right.
And Frank's name is there, Jason's name is there, Mike's name is there, and in parentheses it says they're in the waiting room. But I can still send them a personal message. So your point is, if I send to all individually, they shouldn't be able to reply. Is that what you're saying, Robert?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to say, this is a message from Jeff to all in the waiting room. Please reply if possible. Boom.
Now I sent a personal one. I sent a personal one to Jason, and he was able to respond.
Okay.
to me as a co-host. Frank just responded hello
Yeah.
from the waiting room. So you sent the general message, and there's at least one response.
I can reply to
Right.
the all participants message as well. So it looks like maybe that's changed. Because I feel like the first time I saw and used the ability to message the waiting room, it was from me to them, all of them. Then it seemed like it progressed like from if I were to message them or him or her individually, then they could reply, but they couldn't instigate a private message from the waiting room initially. And I think that's still the case. They don't have a way to, the only thing they can do is reply. So if they didn't receive anything, there's nothing to click on to reply to, whether it's personal or global. I think what we've confirmed is that they can each individually reply to yet even a global waiting room message now. So, okay, cool.
But is that only because you direct message me the first time, which enabled that feature?
Yeah.
No,
I
because
didn't see anything when I was in there, Jeff. I don't know if I was supposed to or not.
well, I would say David thinks he's out of here. Yeah, I don't know. That's Jason. That's not super obvious. We'd have to do like an order of testing, right?
Right. Yeah. Order of operations.
I didn't send any personals, but Ray did, and so when Ray sent a private one, and that was to you, Jason.
So what it looks like is your typical waiting room panel, and then all of a sudden your panel expands a little horizontally, and there's a chat message there, and the first one was direct to me from hosts, plural, and then the little panel underneath, messages can be seen by hosts, plural, so I responded to that. Any subsequent messages that came in, I still had the little reply box available to me at the bottom of the panel. Had I not been direct message initially, I suspect that reply panel would have never opened up. And the other not so cool thing is on Windows, you can Control V paste into the reply. And so I was trying that feature out, and unfortunately it was just hyperlinks, but I wanted to try some other things, which only the host would see. But, still, if I'm sending you propaganda or whatever popping up in your chat, it's going to throw you off your game while you're in session.
Yeah.
Hacker. You're a hacker.
Yeah, so what I saw was just, again, the waiting room info, the normal waiting info, room info is all I saw.
So let's review real quick the waiting room options, setup options. So who should go into the waiting room? So this is just in case we need to look at this. This is under the settings in the panel under edit options for the waiting room. And so who should go into the waiting room? Everyone, users not in your account. So if you're all part of the same Zoom account, you don't have to. And or users who are not in your account and not part of your whitelisted domains, who can admit participants, hosts and co-hosts only, host, co-host, and anyone who bypassed the waiting room, which is pretty doggone cool in a corporate environment where anybody you work with instantly can manage, for you the waiting room. I think that's very cool. Sort order. Oh, don't remember. Yeah, it says new. I've never seen that before.
Jeff, you sort of missed that, but that's just a function that someone has without being co-host.
Yeah. I didn't read it, but yeah, I mean, that's what hit me was like, I don't have to do anything to these people, and they can help. Only if host and co-host are not present, though. So they can swing the doors open for their peers, even if the host and co-host isn't there. But once a host or co-host shows up, then that privilege, I'm assuming, goes away.
That
Is that the way you read that?
Yeah, that to me sounds very useful. Let's say we have sales guys that are doing some sort of sales pitch, and all of a sudden they're not necessarily the host, but they were invited to come. I could see that being, and the sales guys are always there ahead of time before, anything might, or the host or co-host might show up. I
don't get the sense that they're going to have all the privileges of host or co-host, but they will have the privilege to at least not make their customers maybe, or people they know, wait outside the glass door and go hello. Right. They can go ahead and let them in the meantime. That's cool.
Think of it as sales guys. People coming to the corporate office. The sales guys will meet them in the waiting room down in the lobby before they go meet the president and VP, let's say.
Yep. So this is cool though. Like the sort order in the waiting room is super cool because, I think we've all dealt with it sometime or another, of the participants list just bouncing all over the place, and it still does in meeting because of raised hands priorities, but that's the big difference in join order. First in, top of list. Last in, bottom of list. I love it, and that really helps. Helps you, especially if Ray was acting like a freeway metered lane, kind of 1 car or 2 cars per green, if you will. He would be doing it fairly from top to next to next to next, and people would have reasonable wait times. Do it alphabetically, you're not going to have fair timing, for one, and you're going to almost let this person in, and potentially that list is going to change because 3 more people just popped in and it resorted the list, right? And so I like that. It says 5.10.3 requirement on that one.
And this is a completely new feature.
Yeah.
And did David say if you enable this, you're forcing your attendees to?
No. So those items are the ones that, I don't know if this is displaying in yellow, but this has a slightly yellow background with an exclamation to bullet, if you will. These are the notes that are those hardcore requirements for versions. And if they don't comply to an upgrade, then they can't join the meeting.
I had an issue with that this week. I had a government client, and apparently not all the computers had been updated. Some of them were 7 versions back, and these, they would get prompted to upgrade, so they would hit upgrade, and it would move them up 2 or 3 levels, and then they would join, and then it would force them to upgrade again, because it wasn't going from 7 back right up to 1. It was kind of doing this. Yeah,
they're progressive stages. Yeah.
20 minutes later, the emails are coming in. I can't get into the meeting.
Zoom does have a clean uninstall program, but I think it wipes out all your settings too, which is not desirable in almost all cases. So welcome back, Joe. So under more options, it says users invited during the meeting by the host or co-host. So if I've invited them or Ray's invited them, David, they'll bypass the waiting room automatically, which is pretty handy. You're not adding workload to yourself, if you will, by we forgot to invite, and then all of a sudden you have to invite them, and you have to watch for them, and you have to let them in, and all that. That's not all part of it. That's good. Allow participants in the waiting room to reply to host and co-host. So that is an option that has to be enabled to be able to experience what you experienced on being able to reply. if the host, this didn't used to exist. This isn't brand new, but this was in the last several months. This is new, and it was the challenge of people complaining, saying, "Hey, if I, the host, like unexpectedly drop from the meeting, does the meeting die?" And the answer was across the board, no. Well, who becomes the host? Well, that would be your co-host. Well, I don't have a. You go, okay, that's cool.
Nancy
but I have
Pelosi.
three co-hosts. Then which co-host, right? And it would be the first co-host that arrived and became the first co-host. And then it goes down the pecking order. Well, I don't have any co-hosts, but I've been unexpectedly dropped from the meeting. So then, are you telling me that the meeting still stays alive? The Zoom would say yes. and well, who becomes the host? And then the answer is the first participant who arrived. And you're like, what? You know, some people are like, oh, okay, no problem. Plenty of people, especially in corporate workspace, said that's a problem, you know, that because this isn't just corporate meetings. These are corporate and outside people as well. And we're giving them host control. And
Jeff,
so, yeah.
Question, is that a recent thing or has that been around for a while?
That behavior existed for quite a while. This last option is their answer to that behavior, and that is they either decide, hey, kill the meeting, or put this option in. And so, if the host and co-hosts are not present, or if they lose connectivity during the meeting, if it's checked, move participants to the waiting room if the host dropped unexpectedly. So if that is not checked, the behavior that I described, the meeting will go on, and in fact, even just a participant will become a host. The first participant arriving will become the host of the meeting. If you check that, it will still keep the meeting alive, but it'll put everybody in the waiting room. And so that's kind of safe keepings until somebody can get back in and become the host and admit all and bring it all back to
yeah.
I had this situation come up this week, but I mitigated it by so I logged in as host on my desktop computer. I went to my smartphone, same account on the mobile network, logged in. It prompted me, do you want to be host, take over? Do you want to be co-host? I said co-host. So now I'm co-host and technically I'm participant number one. Well, we get thunder, lightning storms every afternoon here. Sure enough, power glitch, bam, right away on my phone, I became the host. And until I could bring my desktop back in and then from my phone, throw control back over to the desktop, because I did not write down my reclaim host code. And so had I not had my phone on there, I would have been scrambling to figure out, oh, man, what's the host code? How do I regain control?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but if you, and talking, thinking granularly, if you were from that machine that got disconnected and dropped, if you were to log back in as the account owner who created that meeting, you don't need a host key to get back in and be host.
It would ask.
These days, it'll pop you up and say, "Do you want to be the host or do you want to remain co-host?" Because you were gone. You've been gone long enough to where we had to create another host, and so there's a host, but you're the account owning previous host. Do you want to become the host or do you want to remain a co-host? And there's no intervention for the key to have to be provided. The key can be used, one, if they can join without host present, and then there's no host present, but they can be in the meeting. Then somebody with that key can put it in and they're good to go. But there is this time I'm probably willing to go test this. Ray is co-host, and Jason, I'll make you a co-host just in case as well. But I'll hard disconnect myself. I'll bring up my network interface dialog, and I'll disable my network card via software, and it'll boot me in a heartbeat. Right, take me right out of the meeting just as if I unplugged it. And but there's this time that I can be cut. My Zoom client recognizes that abrupt disconnect, and it tries to immediately reconnect with no need to sign on, sign in, put in a key. It will just, if it can, it'll just pop right back in the meeting. You'll hardly know I was gone, and it will not reassign a host in the meantime, because, and I don't know what that time frame is, but it made it's kind of like in DNS and others, that time to live value. You made it back within that time to live window, and that it's recovered. Like months ago, Zoom had an AMD processor bug, and it blew my Zoom client was so screwed up 30-45 minutes into the Zoom test kitchen. The live video, some of it would stay there, but the participants window wouldn't redraw, and so it would just splatter new names on top of the other names. I mean, it was just a mess and unusable. I couldn't even use anything on the toolbar and so forth. I eventually got to a point, I didn't know what the problem was. I learned that it was an AMD issue, and they fixed it a couple weeks later, a week or two later. But I would disconnect and come back in, and it would kind of freshen things up for a little bit. But in one of our meetings, I had to do that like twice. And a lot of people didn't know, because it was like when Ed Willock was talking, I just disappeared and came back. I was going to add something else to that. I don't remember what it was now, but it's certainly doable. So I'm the host. I'm going to do this real quick and just show you this. Ray is a co-host, and Jason, I'm going to make you a co-host. So we have two to choose from that will become the host. I'm going to bring up my network window. Okay. Ethernet.
Jeff, don't leave us. Jeff, please, don't leave us.
So on this PC, I don't even have wireless. It's not even an option. So I only have just a single connection to the network here. I'm going to bring up the Ethernet interface. I'm going to go to the adapter options. Here, I'll show you the screen I'm on. So this network connection screen, right? I'm gonna right click on this Ethernet 2, and I'm gonna disable it. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna disable this, and away.
There's no picture of him. So this is that period where it's signing him back in, and there he is.
Yep, I'm back.
We barely missed
noticeable,
you.
Right?
Right.
I never lost host. I guess we could turn on a time clock and see. I mean, does somebody have something they can use as kind of a high-end stopwatch? Because I've never really tried to identify the amount of time I have to be away before I lose that opportunity.
Well, and it also depends if your machine reboots, like if you lose power or something like that.
Yeah. If it's something there where you actually have work to get your own system back up and going. But I did nothing. All I did was disable my card, and I re-enabled it. I did nothing to Zoom to reconnect myself. Zoom did it all for me. And I just think it's super impressive that it senses it and recovers the way that it does, that you just almost don't even know.
Right. My thoughts is that because, again, in that case, Jeff, you're using a client to their server, right? So
Yeah.
they're constantly talking to each other. So that's, and this is my pet peeve about HLS streaming, which is you don't have the client anymore and the server's talking anymore. The server's just blasted the client, and the client just hopes, the server hopes that the client is there. But in this case,
it's a whole different approach. It's in the world of Internet Protocol, IP, you have TCP and you have UDP, right? And UDP is this message in a bottle approach. Put the message in the bottle, throw it in the direction that you think they are, and hope it gets there. But you'll never know for sure. And that's why they call it. It's super fast. The bottle's a poor side of the example for speed, but it's very fast. It's low latency because it's what they call an unreliable protocol. And that's that. Some applications are looking for the lowest latency solution, and they don't need to know. They don't need acknowledgments. They're acts that come back and say, "I've got you. I've got you. I've got you." But when you need reliability, then you have to use the TCP protocol, and that's a very reliable protocol with acknowledgments that are expected to come back. And if they don't, I'm going to assume you didn't get it, and I'm going to send it again. And so that can cause great latency. And some applications absolutely have to have that. Therefore, there's latency. And so, yeah, I mean, I get it. And I'm glad both are available. And, because there's other ways they can develop to help recover, for that. They could tell somebody, I don't know how practical this is, but hey, instead of sending 24 frames a second, send 60, because we're going to do it over UDP, which is faster. But that will allow us to lose frames and simply drop them, and the viewer will never know. I mean, I don't know how practical that is, but you know what I'm saying is if there's more affordability for loss and still have a deliverable, product at the end. But needless to say, it's depending on what they're developing for, I guess. But anyway,
understood. Again, with my 20 years of being in the streaming world, that's why I miss the old technologies compared to the newer one that good old Apple forced us to get into HLS.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody's interested in, identifying the time or not, but I'm willing to do it again. And
Ray's got a clock up, by the way.
You have some seconds there. All right. So I will do the disconnect again.
Go grab a cup of coffee.
No, I don't want to make it. I know it's not very long. I'd be surprised if it's even 15 seconds, possibly hardly even 10 seconds. 10 seconds is a long time to be disconnected on an internet connection. But I'm gonna count to 10. I'm gonna disable. I'll count to a full 10. As a matter of fact, I'll get this vMix clock up in front of me.
10 Mississippi, no cheating.
Yeah. So I have a clock with seconds running on vMix right now, and I'll use that, and I'll do 10. So let me go back to the properties. Okay. Right click. I'm pointing at disable. And I'm gonna go 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yeah, and he's frozen, and he's back.
Wow.
So it survived 10 full, and I was staring at the clock hard. It's 10 full seconds, and it survived that. So let me try 15. Okay, I'm pointed there. Seconds of that whole reconnection process, I guess. I don't even see anything other than my video come alive in Zoom again when it finally does. So I never lost host. No reassignment there, right? Because I can't see it update.
And we had a freeze frame of you.
A freeze frame of me, which is appropriate.
Yeah, your video froze. You never left the participants panel, and the host title never left your name on the participants panel.
Yeah, no reassignment. Okay. Well, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm gonna go for 20 seconds. 3, 2. Yeah, that one on my end was a different experience, and it didn't prompt me to be host or co-host because it hadn't done a reassignment yet.
Right.
But there was something in between that and the previous time. So 20 seconds created. That was the very first time I've seen it actually like bring Zoom up from all you guys being frozen, bring up a reconnect dialogue. I didn't have to click anything, but I saw some work going on my desktop that time that I hadn't seen before. It all happened behind the scenes previously.
I've had that happen too. Yeah.
Your name just started to disappear from the participants panel, and then it came back.
So 20 seconds looks like a threshold. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the 25 just to ensure it. But at that point, I'm guessing there will be a reassignment of a host, and I will get prompted to be a host or a co-host when I reconnect. I don't know whether it's going to automatically try to reconnect. Still, it has been, but or not. But we'll give it a shot. So I'm gonna watch it for 25 seconds this time. And 5, 4, 3, 2.
You're coming back too soon, Jeff. Oh, you're muted. What was that, Ray? 35?
37.
37?
37 on your end for the whole process. So that was from my disable to re-enable on my network interface. That was 25 full seconds. And I disconnected, like my gallery window even went away. But when I re-enabled it at 25, the Zoom client eventually popped back up, did an auto reconnect. But I have the last 2 times come back host, no intervention, but muted by default as well, which was not the case on the first 3. The first 3, I came back unmuted even. So, all right, this is going to be my last one, but I'm going to do 30 seconds and
all right.
see if we can find this threshold.
Yeah, I noticed.
Count me down.
Yeah, Jeff on my end is out of sync with the video and audio.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm out of sync on my vMix too. I can see it. Yeah, something's kind of screwy.
It's good on mine.
Okay.
Give us a clap.
Oh,
yeah, you're right on.
Really?
Out of sync. My end.
Pretty in sync here.
Okay.
Okay.
Frank, you're if you're in sync, Frank.
He looked pretty in sync. I mean, it might have been a millisecond or something, but I mean,
so it's not
good.
like a Canadian server issue or something like that.
Okay.
The maple syrup on the server slows it down a little bit.
That was wrong. That's so wrong. Let's get to the timer.
All right, so I'm going to count 30 seconds this time. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Oh, I saw a window
45
change.
seconds.
Jeff
45
is the
seconds.
host now.
So did somebody become a host?
Theoretically, yes. I didn't notice it change in the participants panel, but when you came back, I got the little blue balloon in the corner of the screen that said Jeff is host now. So at some point you weren't.
So 30 seconds on my end was the very first time on my desktop I saw Zoom show I was disconnected. As the first time it ever told me I was disconnected from the meeting. So that was 30 seconds. And somewhere there's got to be a moment where you've been gone just long enough to where a host, you guys see the host, you know who the host is. It's not me. I'm not there. And when I come back, I get the prompt instead of auto reassignment. I don't know. I just don't know where that threshold is. But 30
Well,
seconds
why don't
is
we
awfully
sign off now?
close.
Why don't we sign off now and come back after dinner?
Yeah. No, I mean, I will say I went 1 second over 30 seconds, and that's where I saw the visual disconnect that I had not seen the whole time on all the previous tests. So 30 seconds was a definite disconnect on my end. Then the question would be on the server, how long is it? There's got to be kind of a next time to live that says, okay, if you come back, so-and-so's host, but we're still going to make you host within the next 5, 10, 15 seconds. I don't know. But then there's that next final threshold, I would guess, of that prompt when I finally come back of where I make the choice whether I want to be host or co-host. It's got to be there. So anyways, I think it's pretty impressive and intelligent in the sense that that it handles it. I mean, literally, I haven't done anything except disable abruptly my network interface card and re-enable it. That's all I've done. I've never told Zoom to reconnect or sign in or anything like that. It's 100% automatic.
You know, thinking this through, I think you would automatically become the host when you rejoined. Because I remember a couple of times where I was made a co-host in a meeting, started the meeting, yada, yada, yada. And then the person that created the meeting, AKA the host, came into the meeting just to check how things were going. And, you know, all of a sudden all control went to that person. So I think that's probably baked into the back end, right?
That was the previous behavior. But then they came up with, but the difference here is me making you the host and then I leaving the meeting versus me, the host, being abruptly disconnected. And is there an eventual timeout? You know, I mean, what's one more minute? I'm gonna do this for 1 full minute.
But I'm co-host right now.
And yeah, and I'm gonna let it. You know, I'll come back and it'll be over a minute for you guys, but I'm going to be disabled and disconnect for a minute and see if somebody becomes the host and which I would say somebody will have to be designated host in the participants window even. And then when I arrive, will it, like you say, just give me assumptive host because I'm the account owning creator of the meeting, or will it eventually get to a point where I do in fact receive that prompt as if, because that's the behavior if I give somebody host, does it ever become the behavior of a prompt if I get disconnected in that sense? So let's try it. I mean, what's 1 more minute and we'll call it good. Here we go. We lost Ray. Okay. All right, there's that. I'm going to do this. I'm coming up on 30.